Really good acting is creative, artistic acting, which means the actor, although they know what lines they're going to say, obviously, and they know the moves they're going to make and on which line they're going to make the move, they still don't know exactly when and how they're going to do it. It surprises them the way it comes out tonight versus last night and tomorrow night. So I'm calling that type of acting unduplicatable. I'm going to stick with the term unduplicatable, though, because that's a term that I think people can understand. You're doing the techniques that lead you to what Stanislavski called the threshold. He said, my technique will take you up to the threshold every performance, and some nights you step over the threshold into what he probably would say was magical acting. Creativity is that which is not yet. If it already exists, you can't create it. It was created earlier. If an actor plans it out well, and I believe totally in getting it down and rehearsing and so on, then they can relax and their artistry produces the line or the movement in a way that's new to them that night. It's called being in the moment. Most actors know and will say that's what they attempt to do. It's hard to do directly. So with some of the techniques we'll be talking about, if you do concentrate on the techniques, all of a sudden you're in the moment, and then you're not, and then you are, and then you're not. In the literature, most actors, famous world-class stage actors talking about their experience with being in the moment, it's very chancy. They don't know what scene it's going to happen in, or if it's going to happen that night. They hope that it happens for a minute or two or three or four. Then they feel they've achieved something. It's relaxing, letting go and letting your creative self produce the words and the movement. You allow yourself to be surprised by how and when you do the movement. But when, if it's between these two words that you need to butt your head against the wall or something, you're still going to butt your head against the wall between this word that you just said and that one that you're going to say after you butt your head. But exactly how and exactly when within those two words you're going to do that surprises you. Wow, I've never done it that way before. But it still comes after that word and before this word. So you can be very precise with it and still rely on the chance that it will be unduplicatable. Okay?
Can anyone learn to act?
Anyone can learn to act. Anyone can learn to act, yes. Nobody should become an actor. It's too difficult, but yes, anyone can learn to act if they're not so rigid in their thinking that you think that they should be institutionalized because they just can't adapt to, they can't relate to the real world. But yeah, and we'll get into some of the techniques and might even try them a little bit. But back to natural. I think someone who's studying Zen is in Zen training, where they spend a lot of time, if they're eating, they concentrate on eating. If they're walking, if they're digging a ditch, they concentrate on just that and they get into that moment through the discipline of concentrating on that. I think they could be doing unduplicatable acting quite soon if they picked up a script. Because they do it for what it is that moment, and the next moment will be different, so when they do take two, it's going to be delightfully surprising to them as well. Professional acting can be only duplicatable acting, technique. Everyone knows what you're going to do, they know how you're going to do it. They know when you're going to do it. There are no surprises, but it's professionally done. They feel they got their money's worth, or they don't feel they got their money's worth. But that's the kind of acting that they're used to. Predictable. You still watch them because it's your favorite actor doing the predictable. And They're doing it in a way that you hope they do it next time because you like that, and so on. That's probably the most important theme of this seminar. What are you shooting for as an actor, teacher, salesman, minister, or whatever? What's the ultimate? Well, first, get the technique down. Knowing that you're doing that because there is this thing called magical, unduplicatable acting in the not too distant future. And it might even happen today. You might get a hint of it today, meaning your time in class or in acting. So most of what we're going to talk about is really the technique for becoming professional, being able to produce a part, manufacture a part night after night after night. You get your paycheck, and a year later you get another part. There's nothing wrong with that. In fact, that's the first step towards unduplicatable acting. Another saying you can write down if you're taking notes: craft is everything. You can have craft without art, but you can't have art without craft. So I started off by saying this ridiculous thing about magical acting, as if there is such a thing, and I do believe there is, so that you'd challenge me to say, well, what about going out and getting a job? Yeah, the craft will get you the job, or that you show what you've got that they can take or reject as they wish. Possibly Sean Penn, and master doesn't mean they're going to do it every time, but you watch him because you don't know, he doesn't know, I feel, how it's going to come. He trusts himself to produce something that's going to be worth the millions of dollars that they pay him, and will progress the plot or the film, the story, the character, more than if he does something out of his logical brain predictably. If I do this, the audience will know that I'm this kind of a guy, blah, blah, blah. But instead, he knows generally what direction that character is going, and then he does magical acting and moves further in the right direction. One critic who obviously likes Sean Penn a lot too said he trusts himself so much that he'll get himself into a corner. He'll climb up the tree when he's acting and act from there, while other people have their feet on the ground. Then he'll climb out on the limb of the tree and act from there. Then he'll go out onto the branch of the limb of the tree and act from there. And then, and he's the only actor, said this critic, who does this, he'll get on the leaf and act from there. No safety net or anything. And most often pulls it off, whether or not you like Sean Penn or the parts that he plays. You have to know that you're willing to take the risk. Okay, I've had actors come into class because they said, when I started acting 4 years ago, in my first production, something magical happened, and I've been trying to get that back ever since. It's a scary thing to be a risk taker when you actually take the risk and magic happens. You know, it's dumbfounding, and it scares a lot of people, and so they pull back to professionalism. I don't want to say they hide behind professionalism. There's nothing at all wrong with being professional, but they've decided on some level, even though they might say, I want to have this exciting feeling again, they were scared so badly by the experience of being out of control, according to their logical brain, and having their creative brain in control, that they, on some level, have said, I'm not going to let that happen anymore. The logical brain can do that. And then the creative brain just has to sit around hoping it gets another chance someday. So, no, a person doesn't have to be a risk taker. They just have to be willing to be frightened where they know they can What I tell people to do when they become frightened in the middle of a scene, rather than stopping the scene, which is what actors mostly do in class, they'll forget their line. That's a convenient excuse for not continuing. Or they'll start giggling. Sometimes they'll even start crying, even if the scene's not sad, because they got to do something to stop this excitement of being creative in front of people, or just being creative in general. So what I suggest they do is when they start lifting off the ground and becoming frightened, they don't say the next line. They continue acting. They continue in the scene, in the direction they were going. So there's a silence there that's still potent, and the audience can accept it. And then the person will perhaps come to terms with, I've lifted off the ground, but I can still act from here. Now I'll try the branch, now I'll try the limb, now I'll try the leaf as time goes on. So yeah, I don't want people to think if they say to themselves, I'm not a risk taker, that they can't do unduplicatable acting, because they can. Letting it happen is basically what we're talking about. So I would do the, I forget what term you used, where you really work hard at it to try to make it happen, where you pre-plan it, that's what you said. Yeah, I would pre-plan a lot. I would pre-plan everything. I would really get into that script and know that on that word you're going to make that gesture. And then don't make that happen, but let it happen. So night after night, you know you're going to make that gesture, as I said earlier, you're going to make that gesture at a specific point between two words. But you're not going to make it, you're going to let it be made, or let it happen. And most actors will do the whole 2-hour play making it happen, producing it, doing a good job, getting praise and their paycheck afterwards. But they weren't open to the possibility that they could do unduplicatable acting, but still be the same gesture at between the same two words, but it would have been much more exciting.
Letting it happen is being in the moment.
Yes, it is. Yeah. Whatever that is, whatever being in the moment is. And people can argue about that, but most people agree that's a good thing to do if you're acting. Do it moment to moment to moment. And I'm not saying that these techniques give you 100% of being in the moment on every play by any means. Our logical brain keeps wanting to do it right, and so it'll come in and try to take over from your creative part.
If you don't have the words memorized and you try to create magic, you're going to stumble on the words or not make what you're intending to do. And it's much harder to be in the moment if you're struggling with remembering words than just having them within you and let them come out.
Absolutely. Yes. There are various ways of memorization, and you'll get your own way. I don't want to get into answers as a technique right now, but that's a good way of memorizing without having it by rote or winding up with a canned presentation. But yes, I saw on Charlie Rose Anthony Hopkins talking about acting, and he said first thing is memorize the lines and rememorize them and being able to do them standing on your head. And I've done a lot of talking about that in class to encourage people to do it, and they say, yeah, it really makes sense. Then they will come up and I'll give them a technique to work with their scene that leads towards the magical, and they forget their lines. But I knew them at home, yeah. Study them once again that many times. If you did them 100 times, do them 200. In fact, Anthony Hopkins used that number. He'll go through the lines a couple of hundred times, because If you have any fear of saying the wrong line or of forgetting the line, that's going to inhibit your ability to move over into the creative. Your logical is hanging on desperately because it wants to get the words right, because that's its job in a way, you know, and it don't want to screw it up. So it makes you produce the words in a way, maybe not this badly, but very carefully. Someone give me a sentence, like a 5 or 6 word sentence, if you would. Anyone? It doesn't have to be from a play. Okay, Allison.
How come I always have to do it?
Okay, how come I always have to do it? So, with answers, each word is going to be an individual answer to a question that I might say out loud, or I might just imagine it. How come I always have to be the one to do it? How come I always have to be the one to do it? How come I always have to be the one to do it? How come I always have to be the one to do it? How come I always have to be the one to do it? How come I always have to be the one to do it? How come I always have to be the one? I missed be. How come I always have to be? How come I always have to be the one to do it? How come I always have to be the one to do it? How come I always have to be the one I'm answering on now? How come I always have to be the one to do it? 2 again. How come I always have to be the one to do it? How come I always have to be the one to do it? That's just like once through. I was asking questions in my head to make the next word in line in the sentence the answer word. So it was answering or communicating. What I got that I was communicating most of the time was the state of mind of this person who says, how come I always have to be the one to do it? And I did about 5 answers there. So you go through your whole script that way. Each sentence, like if it's a 7-word sentence, you say it 7 times, plus another 7 times, just to be sure. Then you move to the next sentence. It's 10 words. You say it 10 or 20 times. And what you're doing is exploring meaning, like I got the meaning of the character, or a possible meaning of a character who says, how come I have to be the one to do it? And I'm exploring the script with answers, getting all sorts of nuances, and I'm memorizing it, and I wind up with it memorized, but in an uncanned way, because any word is possible. If you think, I would like you not to think in terms of emphasizing a word, or hitting a word, or stressing a word, but because that'll lead to mechanical acting, but to answer with the word. So you've got it memorized. You take it in to rehearsal. You may have made some choices with your answers. You found out that these 3 words in this long sentence are really key to the whole play, to my character and so on. So I always want to answer with them. But by answer meaning communication, every night that you answer with those 3 words, people don't hear them as being stressed or accented or emphasized. They hear it as this meaning, the next meaning, and the next meaning. So each word is communicating meaning or feeling. I got a lot of feeling with, how come I always have to be the one to do it? How do you get yourself into that state, the zone of being creative? Answers is a good way of doing it, because if you're communicating, you're in the moment. If you're communicating, you're in the moment. If you are communicating, you're in the moment. If you are communicating, you're in the moment. If you are communicating, you're in the moment. If you're communicating, you're in the moment. If you're communicating, you're in the moment. If you're communicating, you're in the moment. When you're at home with your script, you've got the part, you got a tape recorder, you're exploring with answers, yes. Otherwise, it can become this is not answers, it's stupid, don't waste your time doing this kind of thing. Don't waste your time doing this kind of thing. Don't waste your time doing this kind of thing. Don't waste your time doing this kind of thing. Don't waste your time doing this kind of thing. Don't waste your time doing this kind of thing. That's not answers, it's nothing. It's more of a feeling that I want to communicate something on this word, and that's it. If I'm going through in sequence, first word, second word, third word, then I know what word to concentrate on. Then I know what word to concentrate on. Let me do that. Then I know what word to concentrate on, okay? So there was maybe a split second where which word was my question, and so then you know what word.
So might one think of it as searching for meanings rather than answers? In my own mind, I guess I connect with it as a search for a variety of meanings as opposed to answers, but maybe
yeah.
It's just my own.
No, I think that's good. You're searching for meaning rather than which word to hit.
Right.
Okay, sure. And you'll find a lot more meaning if you're searching for it. And if you do a sentence and you answer on a word and nothing happened, chances are you were just hitting it mechanically by rote or whatever. Let's talk about my favorite concept instead, because techniques, I've taught hundreds and narrowed it down to 15 or so, but we aren't familiar with them. So my favorite concept is allowing yourself to be surprised by what you do, when you do it, and when you say your lines, or if you're in an improvisation, what you say. So the concept of allowing yourself to be surprised by how and when you say the lines and how and when you do the movement. If you start with that, and then you're not surprised, but everyone says, that was great, you say, okay, I'm getting the craft down, the technique, the professionalism down, and I'm still not reaping the rewards of the fun of being creative. You're in the middle of a scene and you go blank. First thing, even before that, is to realize most actors forget their lines several times a night, but they happen to fake it well enough until they remember the line that they keep going. So maybe they only forget it for a second, and then it's back. But if you're in the moment, you don't have the next line. You don't know the next line because you're in this moment. And so it's a given that you don't know the next line. And you could say you forgot your line, but yeah, you get it real fast. So if you realize that you're going to do something, if you're in front of an audience, it's going to cover the line, even if it's on camera. It's very seldom that an actor who is trained and has a lot of experience will go blank and not be able to pull it off. Sometimes they'll come up with something that's even better than what you were planning on doing because of that adrenaline flow of fear that you forgot your line. But my advice is, if you feel that you've forgotten your line, stay with what you just were doing. If you were trying to get that person to stand up, stay with that. And the way you look at them will make the audience believe that you are having a silent moment of acting, continuing what you did with the words stand up. And then you can improvise a little bit on the last moment of getting them to stand up. It means you're still in that moment. And then the line will come to you, your partner will say something to get you back on course, or you'll skip a page. Life goes on. So don't worry about it. That's the main thing. So our second answers is our first memorization technique. The second one is don't try to remember the next line. Because the moment, if I'm in a scene with you and I'm trying to get you to stand up, and the moment I go blank and then try to remember my next line, I'm no longer in the moment of trying to get you to stand up, so I telegraph to the audience, I'm lost. So if I don't try to remember the next line, I trust, period, I trust. Then I look at you, and looking at you will probably anchor my next line to come in. And this is like totally different from stand-up. So you've got a lot of leeway. Just don't worry about it. But what happens if you do?
Yeah.
Don't try to remember your next line. Stay there in that moment. And if that becomes a habit, you're going to, every time you forget a line in class or on stage in front of an audience, you're going to get more experience in how to handle that.